Well, I live in the Hunters Creek subdivision, and Hunters Creek was impacted greatly by, in 2007 with the initial flood and then the flood that happened that winter. Uh, Part of the problem was once the water came into the subdivision, it didn't drain out of the subdivision. So our streets and yards stayed filled with water for days. So in essence, the neighborhood was cut off for about 3 days, even after the water had receded everywhere else in Findlay. And a lot of people lost a lot. We had many houses flooded. There was debris throughout the neighborhood for several weeks, and they brought in front loaders and dump trucks to come in and take the debris away. And it was pretty emotional for a lot of people. So after the initial flood, we went through that. We knew that there was a problem with drainage in the subdivision at that point. I mean, it was clear that it wasn't draining like it needed to. I just one weekend thought it's time to do something, so I created the website fixhunterscreek.org and started by just putting some basic messages up, and then we got together and created a flyer, and we sent it to every address in Hunters Creek about how there's clearly an issue and that it's time for the neighbors to come together and talk about if there are any fixes to this. We had over 100 and some people show up for the first meeting. City engineer worked with us to help develop this whole plan for how to improve the drainage. And it took a long time. We finally got it approved, and then they broke ground and started, and then it was at least a year-long project.
To actually go all the way across the development out to Lye Creek.
Other areas in Findlay started talking about, well, what about our area? Which is a fair question. Ours was a little different than some other areas, though, because some of our issue really was just drainage. You've got to get the water out of the subdivision. Our drainage project will not prevent the subdivision from flooding. So it could still certainly flood. But at least now, if it floods, the water won't sit there for days. I mean, we had fire trucks out here. They had to come out and physically pump the water out of the neighborhood because it wasn't going to ever recede. I mean, that was the problem. It wasn't going to recede. It just sat there. So now with the drainage, there's ways to open up different valves that then once Lye Creek drops, they can open up these valves and then the water flows out of the neighborhood. So I guess I could say Hunters Creek could be a microcosm for what could be a macrocosm, because if we're going to really address the problem, you're going to have to look at all the different situations that are involved. You have the homeowners, you have the farmers, you have the city, but we have to figure out in the end, what can we do that would best serve the whole community and hopefully give us some protection from flooding? Because in the end, if we do nothing and there's no collaboration and every side stays to themselves, the flooding will continue whenever it continues. It'll do the kind of damage it does, and then you're making no efforts to mitigate anything. And I'm not the type person to want to pull a community together and do community meetings. That's not something I do. But it was one of those things where after I saw what happened, it was like, okay, well, we need to do this together. And I was glad it worked out like it did. And I'm very thankful for the people who live out here.